Hey, welcome to Larry's Library, and welcome to another edition of the Sunday Scan. Now, this is where I take you along with me as I read a single issue comic from my slightly less than a long box full of unread single issue comics that I'm still going through. This week I read Kobra issue number 1. This one right here for the scan. Now, Kobra is a very strange character and a very strange title. See, one thing you'll learn about me if you've been following the channel, or if you continue to, is that I like a lot of the really oddball, strange titles that got kicked out in the 70s from both Marvel and DC, and Atlas too, for that matter. 70s were a strange time for comic books, but a lot of great stuff came out, and a lot of stuff that's less than great, like this one, but is still very interesting and I find enjoyable. It seemed like at that time DC and Marvel were competing for rack space. They were just throwing anything and everything they could out, just churning stuff out to see what would stick. And a lot of things didn't stick, and this was one such example. This ran for like 7 issues and was canceled. And then the storyline was eventually wrapped up in one of those $1 DC super specials. I don't know what they're called, but I do have it. I did secure it on eBay, so I'd be able to get the conclusion to this story, this strange story. And the origins of Kobra, the comic book and the character, are fascinating if you've never looked into it. This book, and I'm getting a lot of this from Conway's Corner, which was sort of like DC's answer to Bullpen Bulletins, or what was Shooter's page called? I think it might have been called Shooter's page. Jim Shooter did something similar at Marvel. And this one, he goes on about how the book came about. And this book came out in '76. I won't spend a whole lot of time with it. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but basically, this piece is saying that this was the brainchild of Jack Kirby and Carmine Infantino. And Kirby's assistant, Steve Sherman, thought of the concept for this. And originally they were going to do the book together. And Kirby plotted this thing, and he drew the first issue. Completely drew the first issue. Didn't get around to doing any covers. And it was about that time that Kirby departed DC. So if you know the history of Kirby at all, then you know that Kirby left Marvel, I think it was the early 70s, somewhere in that time frame, and went over to DC, did a bunch of books, including Commandy and all the Fourth World titles, and a bunch of other stuff, and then he left. He just abruptly left. And went back to Marvel at some point, closer to the late 70s. But at any rate, during that time period, he left a lot of things unfinished. Commandy, he didn't get to finish. And this book, which didn't even get started while he was there. But it was a DC creation, so they wanted to exploit all the Kirby goodness they could. So they tried to make a go of this one. And it is a weird one, and it didn't work, it failed. But some of these failed titles from the 70s are some of my favorites to read. I don't know why, it's just, it's fascinating to me. But this one is particularly interesting. The cover, I believe, is by Ernie Chan. Now, looking at the credits here, or, the signatures on the cover, there's only one. It says Ernie Chua, C-H-U-A. Ernie Chan, apparently, very strange story there, too. When he first started getting work in American comic books, he signed everything as Ernie Chua. Because there was some kind of mistake on his birth certificate or something, his paperwork, and it said Chua. His name was not Chua. His name is Ernie Chan. And later that's corrected. And I know him, and probably a lot of other people know him, mainly from his work on Marvel's Conan the Barbarian, where he inked John Buscema spectacularly for decades worth of Conan comic books. But he was a great penciler too, as you can see from this cover. Now, in that info page I was reading from, it says this cover is by Joe Kubert. But I don't see any evidence of that. It doesn't look like Joe Kubert to me, and there's no Joe Kubert signature. Just Ernie Chua. Both the databases I deal with don't list Joe Kubert. So I don't know. I think that's some kind of mistake. It's possible he did some rough layouts and then Ernie Chan finished it all up. Possibility. But anyway, this book, this comic I read today, I've had it for a while, but I was waiting until I could complete getting all of the 7 issues plus the special issue that summed it all up. So I started reading that. I figure each week I'm going to go back and forth between a title and Godzilla until I get through that. So this week I'm taking a Godzilla break, doing Kobra. So on this opening page, you can see the wild designs here of the main character. So the plot is really crazy, kind of hokey. It involves these conjoined twins. Back then they were still calling them Siamese twins, and they got separated at, right after birth, and the one was thought to have died. But then you find out, along with the brother that lived, well, they both lived, he didn't know it, they both lived, and the one guy, he saved, that they thought was going to die, he's saved by this snake cult, okay? They all dress in snake garb, and they worship the snake god, and they thought, and they made him their cult leader. So it's this weird snake cult. It is just a crazy story. But we talk about so Martin Pasco wrote this script, adapted from what Kirby had finished of it. And this first issue is drawn by Jack Kirby with inks by D. Bruce Berry, and the wonderful Pablo Marcos does some little bit of finishing up stuff here. And then with the second issue, Pablo Marcos is supposed to be the main inker. So that should be good because Pablo Marcos is fantastic. So yeah, it is a strange one. They credit Jack Kirby and Steve Sherman here with the plot of this, which is some 70s insanity here. So yeah, so you've got this weird snake cult running around. This guy, Kobra, with a K, is their leader, and he is the twin of who will become our hero, I assume, the other brother, eventually. And it's unclear what the motives of this snake cult are, other than world domination, of course. And they have all these weird artifacts from all over the world. They've got this one they call the Ovoid that has a giant 15, 20-foot tall robot in it that's from another world. And he can control it. Unclear how he can control it, but he does. And he sends it to New York to kill his brother. He doesn't realize that they are, how did they put it? What's the word? They're connected psychically so that when the one feels pain, the other feels pain. And so eventually he realizes if he kills his brother, then he'll die too. So he calls the robot off from killing his brother. It is just, it's kind of nutty, kind of hokey, but boy, it's a lot of fun. And some really great 1976 Jack Kirby art, as you can see from my scans. It's pretty good stuff. If you like Kirby, you're going to like it just for that reason. Yeah, and it's pretty nutty. It sets it all up, and DC does their best to continue this title, which we'll find more out in a couple weeks when I read issue 2. We'll see how they make out, because we're not going to have Jack Kirby pencils to carry it with the next issue and going forward. But yeah, this is one of those canceled 1970 series that I do like to dig into, and I hope you like taking a look at that. And join me next week when I will get back to Godzilla, the next issue in my reading of that, the single issues of Godzilla. But yeah, hope you like that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do that. Hit the bell to notify yourself and give me a thumbs up if you like this video. And I will see you next time.